Exposed, 7 terrifying tales from the Haunted Wounds of Golgotha uncover the cursed secrets. The town of Golgotha was a deadweight, a place where shadows loomed larger than life. Every corner whispered secrets, and each turn carried the weight of unspoken fears. For Sarah Reynolds, 32, alone with her son Tommy, the weight was crushing. The diner where she worked long shifts was the only bright light in their bleak lives, but as she closed up each night, she felt the creeping chill of something darker. Golgotha's abandoned church loomed like a ghost, its crumbling bricks holding stories that sent shivers down her spine. The cool air curled around her, carrying faint whispers from the church that rattled through her bones, igniting a disturbing curiosity wrapped in dread. The first sobering reality of Golgotha hit Sarah when pets began to vanish. Posters of lost dogs and cats blanketed the diner, faces of hopeful children barely able to mask their despair. Those whispers grew louder, merging with concerned murmurs over coffee cups, hinting at something sinister lurking just out of sight. Each faint sound dragged her heart downward. Was someone watching her? The feeling of being pursued lurked, making her skin crawl. One stormy night, drenched and gasping for breath, Sarah stumbled home, her heart racing from the pounding rain and her dread. She spotted a figure in the shadows, half hidden behind an old oak tree. The hair on the back of her neck rose, and panic consumed her. Peering closer, her mind rushed back the familiar face of a neighbor, one who wielded kindness towards Tommy. But the kindness felt tainted, twisted now. Anxiety clawed at her, nudging her to retreat, to protect her son from whatever darkness loomed outside. Before she could escape inside, the whispers grew louder, morphing into desperate cries echoing from the direction of the church, twisted and frantic, like a warning meant for her alone. The thought of the church's ancient walls harboring horror tightened around her throat. Those who had lived there carried secrets, buried deep under the guise of small-town charm. She recalled the old tablets she'd seen in the library, warning of cursed secrets lying dormant. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The haunting cries grew more urgent, reaching into her bones. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was pulling her toward the church, and the very thought sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. Golgotha had concealed its darkness for too long, woven into the fabric of its community, she could feel it suffocating her. Days turned into restless nights filled with dark dreams, the missing pets becoming a nightmare that gnawed at her core. Was it just folklore, or had the town's twisted past wormed its way into the present, ready to strike? The tipping point was near. The shadows of familiar faces began to feel like masks hiding malevolence. She sensed betrayal in every glance exchanged with the locals. Time was racing, and with each whisper trailing from that forsaken church, it grew clearer. The darkness wasn't just out there, it was close, creeping ever closer to Tommy. The town's legacy was intertwining with their lives, forming a fearful bond that Sarah couldn't comprehend. Would she have the courage to confront the truth lurking under the veil of her normal life, or be devoured by the secrets of Golgotha before she even had the chance? Sarah's heart raced, a wild drum echoing in the silence as she stood frozen at the threshold of her home, staring out into the storm. That figure was gone, swallowed by the night, but the feeling remained a heavy, suffocating presence. She closed the door, locking it tight, sliding the bolt across with shaking hands. Tommy was asleep, the faint sound of his breathing calming her frayed nerves, but it did little to soothe the gnawing dread in her chest. The whispers persisted, like a relentless wind sneaking through the cracks. She paced the small living room, shadows dancing on the walls. The flickering light bulb buzzed overhead, casting an unsteady glow that made the room feel more like a cage than a sanctuary. The town had changed, and so had she. No longer could she dismiss the unease that gripped her. It felt like an infection, spreading through her veins, dragging her toward that forsaken church. What if I just go take a look? The thought stuck its claws in her mind. Rationality waged a war with instinct, but curiosity was winning. She couldn't ignore the cries that had haunted her dreams, seeping into her waking hours. Her feet moved of their own accord, out the door and into the storm. Each step toward the church was a battle against her reason. The rain slashed at her face like icy fingers. The wind howled, carrying the distant echoes of Tom's laughter and the joyful barks of the lost pets. She pushed through the darkness, every instinct screaming at her to turn back, but some malevolent force drove her forward. As she approached the church, the air thickened. The building loomed before her, a dark specter cloaked in despair. It looked mournful, drenched in rain but unyielding, as if it thrived on the suffering it had witnessed. The large wooden doors, worn and warped, beckoned her. "Sarah." The voice came softly at first, layered with anguish. It was almost as if the church itself called to her, and she stumbled closer. Hands trembling, she tried to push open the door, but it wouldn't budge. A frenzied pounding echoed from inside, like fists slamming against wood. Panic clawed at her throat. "Let me in," she cried out, feeling a strange urgency building. "Tommy needs to be safe." No response came, just the ominous creaking from the depths of the church. It was then she noticed a shadow flicker across a nearby window, darker than the night surrounding it. Dread pooled in her gut as she turned to look, but nothing was there, just the rain spilling in disorganized patterns against the glass. Her instincts screamed at her to move away, but as she turned back towards the door, the reverberating whisper transformed into a swarm of voices, growing louder, spilling secrets from the cracks of the church. "Help him, help us!" She staggered back, heart pounding like a war drum. Just then, a window shattered, splintering the night into chaos as a figure clambered out. The silhouette, drenched and wild-eyed, was like a spirit cast from another world, a long-lost soul seeking refuge. "Sarah!" it screamed, voice raspy and urgent. "You have to listen." "It's already here." Before she could process the words, it lunged forward, and in that moment, she realized the first of Golgotha's secrets was about to be unraveled, charging straight at her. What had she awakened? The thoughts bore down on her as shadows encroached, thick and menacing. Would it consume her? And what about Tommy? The storm raged on, but the real tempest was unfolding right before her eyes. "What do you mean?" she stammered, panic gripping her voice. Just as the figure opened its mouth to reply, the ground beneath her trembled, and they were swallowed by an encroaching darkness, a whispering tide that reached for more than just their souls. What danger lurked in that shadowy abyss? What terrible truth awaited them? And would they survive long enough to find out? The darkness enveloped them, wrapping around Sarah like a claustrophobic shroud. The figure stumbled against her, its breath hot and frantic against her ear. "We have to get away from here," he shouted, but his wide eyes were too frantic, too haunted for her to feel any comfort in his words. "What is happening?" she gasped, her own heart slamming against her ribcage. The shadows seemed to pulse with their fear, cloaking them deeper in a morass of dread. She felt terror bite into her thoughts, strangling her breath. Golgotha. The figure hesitated, swallowing as if hesitant to unleash the horror steeping in his throat. Sarah could feel her own voice slipping away, and she clutched the shoulders of the wild-eyed stranger, willing him to continue. "It's not just a church. It's a prison for things that shouldn't be. They're angry. They're hungry." His voice cracked, fractured like the shards of glass that littered the ground around them. "What do you mean?" Sarah felt a cold shiver travel down her spine, crawling like worms beneath her skin. In that moment, a cacophony of whispers erupted around them, rising and falling like waves crashing against a shore, each voice more unsettling than the last. "Help us," they begged. "Feed us." Bile rose in Sarah's throat. "Tommy," she breathed. "I have to get back home." "No. You can't leave him. He's in danger," the figure pleaded, his eyes darting around. "They'll come for him. They want him." The ground shook again, a deep rumble reverberating through her bones. The shadows flickered and writhed like serpents, threatening to swallow them whole. Panic surged deeper, and she turned back toward the church, thinking of nothing but her son. The sinister whispers grew louder, becoming a deafening roar filled with promises of doom. Steeling herself, she stepped forward, heart hammering as shards of shattered glass crunched beneath her feet. "What do you want?" she yelled into the void, her voice quaking with anger and fear. Open the door. The whispers hissed, weaving through the air around her like a dark breeze. Become one of us. A blinding flash of lightning illuminated the church, revealing its crumbling facade, the broken windows that seemed to leer at her. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision, flickering and vanishing whenever she turned to look. Don't! The figure screamed, lunging forward to grip her arm, desperate. The moment you step over that threshold, you'll give yourself to them. But the door was almost calling to her now. It pulsed like a heartbeat, its wooden surface glistening ominously in the rain. The whispers swelled, urging, demanding, promising. Her instincts screamed to retreat, yet the storm inside her surged stronger. "What is your name?" she suddenly asked, her curiosity barely piercing through the fear. "Eli," he said hurriedly. "I was trapped here. We need to move. We can't let them take you." But even as he spoke, the air thickened, pressing down on them. The ground tremored, sending sharp gasps from both their mouths as something terrible began to take shape behind them. A figure, darker than night, loomed large, an impossible presence, each heartbeat drawing closer. "Please," Eli whispered. But Sarah's eyes widened in horror as she saw it, a mass of shadow and anguish, swirling like a storm-made flesh. The dread wrapped around her throat, squeezing harder. She was frozen, torn between a primal urge to flee and the pull of that cursed door. Would she dare open it? The whispers merged into a chilling chant, rising to a fever pitch, spitting out the words she feared most. "Feed us. Set us free." In that moment of terrifying clarity, Sarah knew she had awoken something far beyond her understanding, and the fight for Tommy had just begun. What terrible sacrifice would she have to make? Would her fear bind her to this nightmare forever? And as she stood paralyzed at the threshold, she began to wonder whether the real danger was the shadows or the choice she would soon have to make. Eli tugged at her arm, his panic palpable as their feet shifted in the debris-strewn darkness. Lightning flashed again, stark and violent, and in that fleeting brightness, Sarah caught the full dimensions of the looming shadow, an amorphous mass surrounding them, hungry, twisting in anticipation. "Run!" Eli shouted, shoving her backward. But the whispers grew louder, drowning out his voice. "Join us." Open the door. They breathed words that felt like icy fingers brushing against her skin. The surrounding shadows clawed closer, hungry and malevolent. In a raw moment of desperation, Sarah strained her eyes against the dark, searching for a flicker of movement, a sign of Tommy. The thought of him alone, possibly in danger, made her heart race faster. "No! We can't leave Tommy!" she cried, instinctively pulling away from Eli's grasp. "He is not safe. You don't understand." Eli's voice rose above the chorus of the damned. "A mother doesn't abandon her child." And as she shouted, a woman's wail cut through the air. It didn't seem human, the pitch twisted, blending into an echo of torment, layering over the dark whispers. Suddenly, silhouettes began to shape themselves from the thick shadows, ethereal forms stretching and contracting, eyes glowing with pained longing. "They will take him too," Eli warned, his brow glistening with sweat. "You must listen." Sarah took a step back, unwilling to sever her connection to the one last flicker of hope that resided within her son. She realized she had to make a decision: fight for him or risk losing not only him but herself. The door behind her loomed ominously, an object of dread, whispering promises of power and secrets. But power came at a cost. She felt it crawling along her skin, persuading her to take the leap into the darkness and embrace the abyss. Could she trust Eli? "Trust me, Sarah." Eli's voice shook. "If you don't, we'll be lost forever." As if responding to her torment, the air thickened, the shadows flickering violently. Tommy, that thought kept pulling her back, grounding her amid the chaos. She thought of his laughter, the way he would jump into her arms after a long day. "Help us!" they cried. "We crave freedom." Each inhale turned to a gasp, and her body trembled as an unsettling warmth enveloped her, something deep inside urging her to belong, to become part of this gathering dark. Was it despair or desperation that tightened its grip around her soul? Thick tendrils of shadow crept closer, threatening to wrap around her legs. Eli's trembling fingers brushed against the edge of her mind, igniting a flicker of rebellion. Tommy! She shouted, feeling a surge of courage course through her. Stay away from him. I won't let you take him. But the shadow swirled dangerously, and the whispers crescendoed, drowning her out, spiraling into an anguished scream that resonated deep in her bones. Join us! They hissed, weaving their way into the corners of her thoughts. You will never be alone. Suddenly, with a violent lurch, her vision blurred, the church door flung open, yawning wide like the maw of a monstrous beast craving its prey. A wave of energy pulled her forward, and she felt her feet move of their own accord, heading towards that cursed threshold. Sarah! Don't! Eli pleaded, but she couldn't hear him anymore. The truth crashed upon her like icy waves. Instincts screamed for her to break free. But the question lingered, what if entering meant saving Tommy or sealing her fate alongside him? Before she could ponder the weight of that choice, something erupted from the doorway, a blast of horror forcing her to freeze. All hope faded as an anguished face appeared in the swirling shadows. The shattering realization hit her like a blow. What if it was Tommy? I'm coming, sweetie. She cried, heart pounding furiously. I'm coming. And in that moment of truth, the dark shroud merged with her essence, and everything went dark. What awaited them behind that door? Would they find salvation or succumb to the horror lurking just beyond the brink? Sarah awoke in a cold sweat, gasping for air as darkness enveloped her. The particles hung in the air like sinister shadows, whispering ancient secrets she couldn't comprehend. It took a moment to realize she lay on a damp stone floor, the unmistakable chill seeping through her clothes. Tommy! She shouted, the word echoing against the crumbling walls of the forsaken place. Panic clawed at her throat. Had she truly crossed over? This wasn't the familiar warmth of home, but a sickening void and unwelcoming chamber of torment and despair. She pushed herself to her feet, heart racing, searching frantically. There was no telling how long she had been unconscious. The last memory tugged at her mind, a faint recollection of Eli's frantic warning, but where was he now? Tommy! The echo returned, haunting her, as if the darkness itself mocked her cries. In response, the whispers grew sharper, more insistent, wrapping around her like a noose. Join us, join us! The air thickened, suffocating. She stumbled forward, feet shuffling against the gritty floor, searching for any hint of her child. Shadows twisted and danced, forming pale figures that glided closer, their forms flickering in and out of existence. Thin, skeletal fingers reached towards her, imploring her with vacant eyes. Mother, a voice broke through the cacophony of familiar, heart-wrenching sound. Tommy? She stepped back, dread pooling in her stomach. Where are you? Help me. The voice drifted. A faint glow illuminated a corner, and she hurried toward it. As her fingers reached out, desperate and trembling, the light faded, and with it, her heart sank. Was it a trick? Another cruel illusion? Sarah's mind raced with memories of her son's laughter. The joy he brought her. Was this echo of his voice just another way for the darkness to lure her? A surge of strength coursed through her. I will find you. I will fight. The whispers roared in response, merging into an unnerving harmony that filled the air with dread. Shadows twisted violently, and the temperature dropped. She felt icy hands brush against the back of her neck, fleeting yet suffocating. Join us. They hissed, drawing nearer, their breath cold against her skin. No! She screamed, raising her hands in defiance. You won't take me. But instead of retreating, the shadows pressed closer, and in a flash, she found herself surrounded by the dreadful silhouettes of grieving faces, endless mourners trapped in a cycle of sorrow. Each face was etched with despair, mouths open in muted cries of anguish. If you don't leave, you will be one of us. A disembodied voice warned, chilling her to the bone. They reached out as if inviting her into their endless sorrow, fingers of darkness intertwining and pulling at her resolve. Sarah fought the urge to succumb as shivers coursed through her. Tommy! She shouted again, searching for an anchor in the chaotic sea of despair. Where are you? Something brushed against her leg, and she flinched. Her heart pounded louder than the whispers, which had drowned out everything else. Hurry! The voice called again, softer, more distant. Wait. I'm coming. Sarah took off, fueled by adrenaline and desperation. She stumbled through the dark, dodging shadowy tendrils that sought to ensnare her. Suddenly, she spotted a flicker ahead, a faint glimmer of light. Hope surged through her veins as she raced toward it, wishing with every ounce of her being that it was Tommy. But as she neared the light, a shriek erupted from behind. The shadows converged with a ferocity that sent icy terror shooting through her body. You cannot escape. Sarah halted, the light bathing her in a strange warmth, as the shadows receded slightly, revealing more of her surroundings. She gasped as realization dawned. It led to the door, the threshold from which she'd become a gateway back to the nightmare she had escaped. With a resolve tempered by love, she turned, facing the shadows now drawn in tight around her. The grip of despair tightened on her chest as she steeled herself to confront them. Tommy, I'm coming for you, she cried. Out, a battle cry against the despair. But deep within that dark haze, a chilling laughter echoed a promise of something even more sinister lurking just beyond sight. Would she manage to break through the veil and find her son, or would the shadows drag her into the depths forever? The answer felt dangerously close, just as a shroud enveloped her vision once more. What secrets did the darkness conceal? Would she be lost forever, like all the others before her? She had to know. Sarah's heart thudded in her chest as she faced the gathering shadows. The cold air felt alive, wrapping around her like a snake, tightening its grip with every frantic breath. The laughter echoed, a malevolent ripple that made her doubt her own resolve. She had to push through, had to believe that Tommy was waiting for her. What do you want from me? She shouted, her voice trembling but defiant. I will not join you. The silhouettes quivered, shifting in response to her defiance. The whispers evolved into a symphony of torment, as if the air itself was filled with the cries of the lost. You've already lost, you belong to us now, Mother. The spectral figures swayed back and forth like reeds in a storm, their hollow eyes fixated on her. She turned back toward the light, reminded of the warmth it offered. But the shadows' dark, swirling monsters seemed to surge forward, filling the space behind her, blocking her retreat. With each passing second, a knot of dread twisted tighter in her gut, threatening to engulf her. Tommy! She cried again, desperation fueling her screams. A wave of sadness washed over her, memories of his giggles chasing the shadows back momentarily. I won't leave you. With a primal scream, Sarah lunged toward the flickering light. As she did, a sharp pain shot through her ankle. Something cold and slimy snaked around her leg, pulling her down. She fell to the floor with a hard thud, gasping as the chill crept through her bones. The disembodied laughter turned into a raw, guttural sound, a vicious celebration of her fear. She fought against whatever held her, scrabbling to loosen its grip. Sarah kicked out blindly, feeling whatever it was recoil but not release her. The shadows danced menacingly, growing bolder, creeping closer, and she could almost see the despair etched on their faces, twisted in agony. Mother! Tommy's voice rang out again, sharper this time, clearer. She felt it slice through the oppressive darkness, igniting a spark of determination. Hold on, baby! She yelled, finally tearing free from whatever clutched at her. She scrambled to her feet, feeling the presence of the shadows thicken around her. They hissed with anger, a collective fury rising to the surface, an entire world of anguish desperate to keep her. Panic coursed through her as the flickering light beckoned her again. She took a step toward it, knowing it was a fragile hope in a sea of despair. Each step felt like a battle, a choice to defy the suffocating gloom. But just as the light grew, illuminating the contours of another room, a piercing wail filled her ears, louder than anything she had encountered yet. Join us! They screamed in unison. Sarah's heart sank, the weight of their sorrow almost crushing her spirit. The glow flickered ominously, leaving her vulnerable. Can't you see it? The voice taunted her, echoing through the chamber. You are one of us now, Mother, forever. For every face that twisted in despair, another realization collided with her. This place thrived on grief, feeding off her sorrow for Tommy. Collecting herself, she yelled, No! I am not yours. With that, she surged toward the light, an all-or-nothing gamble to reach the escape. As she raced, shadows grasped at her, fingers brushing against her skin, breathing ice-cold despair into her soul. She stumbled but kept moving, the light pulsating, calling her closer. Then it happened, the shadows converged, closing in on all sides, the chilling laughter echoing around her like the tolling of a funeral bell. Just as she reached the edge of light, she felt a sharp, cold hand clamp onto her wrist. "Where do you think you're going?" A voice whispered, slick and torn, as if it were clawing its way up from a grave. Sarah forced a bitter glint of courage into her eyes, enough to face them. With adrenaline surging, she twisted herself free, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. But before she could move, darkness pooled around her feet, and a glowing spectral form materialized in front of her. Tommy, indistinguishable yet achingly familiar. "Mom!" he murmured, fear etched on his little face as he reached out to her. "Tommy!" she cried out, hope and dread intertwining in her chest. "Where are you? What's happening?" The shadows recoiled momentarily, the impact of their anguish seen as Tommy's bright, innocent light shone through, creating a pause in the chaos. But something dark lingered in the corners of the room, a sensation that made her stomach knot with fear. Would she please the shadows and join their tragic chorus? Or could she save her son from being trapped forever, caught in this haunting limbo? The truth was spiraling closer, but would Sarah have the strength to grasp it? And as silence fell, that chilling laughter rose once more, melding with Tommy's plea, a harrowing blend of hope and terror. What awaited them beyond the veil of shadows? "Tommy!" The urgency in Sarah's voice crumbled into a desperate hush as she reached for him, her fingers brushing against light that flickered like a dying star. The shadows surged back, a dark tide against the glimmer of hope, and she felt her heart racing within the confines of her chest. "Mom, please!" Tommy's voice pierced through the murky dread. His face, so familiar and innocent, was both a balm and a source of renewed terror. She wanted to scoop him up, to cradle him and shield him from this malevolence. But the shadows loomed hungrily, as if sensing her hesitation. "Stay back!" she screamed, swinging her arm as though she could banish the darkness with sheer will. The shadows hissed, recoiling and shifting, their forms rippling like a disturbed pond. "I will not give in." The moment hung between them, suspended in anguish. It felt as if the air itself had ceased to move. Tommy stepped closer to the edge of the shadows, a soft glow golden against the ebony void. "I'm scared," he whispered, his small voice trembling. "They want me, Mom, they want both of us." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "We'll find a way out, I promise," she said, but it felt like an empty vow, hollow and afraid. But then the darkness twisted, forming almost a consciousness, as if the shadows were alive, pulsing with a sinister rhythm. "You can't escape your fate," they sang, a cruel melody that swirled around her, wrapping tighter as Sarah staggered backwards. "Join us. We can give you what you lost." A wave of memories crashed over her: laughter, embraces, bedtime stories. "No!" she screamed, clutching her head as if she could drown out their voices. "Tommy is not lost. He's right here." The shadows pulsed violently, the laughter growing into a cacophony of cries that clawed at Sarah's sanity. "You think your love can save you? He's ours, Mother. He'll never leave." Suddenly, the ground beneath her trembled, a low rumble like distant thunder. Shadows morphed into grotesque versions of her past friends, family, faces twisted in misery. They lunged forward, reaching for her with skeletal hands. "Mom!" Tommy shouted again, but this time fear resonated in his plea, tugging at her heart. "They're coming! Run!" Driven by instinct and raw, uncontainable fear, Sarah turned on her heels and sprinted into the blinding light. The laughter echoed in pursuit, a familiar and cruel refrain that sent chills racing up her spine. As she pushed forward, the pulsating shadows lashed out, grabbing at her clothes, her skin, scraping against her with malicious intent. "I won't let you take him!" she roared, a primal scream of defiance. She didn't dare look back. Each step felt more like a battle against an invisible force, an endless march toward freedom. The shadows hissed angrily, mixing anger with desperation. "Leave her. The child is ours." They shouted, and their cries spiraled into a furious whirlpool of despair. And then, just as hope flickered at the edges of her awareness, she stumbled, slamming her palm against a cold surface. Desperation clawed at her throat. It was a door, old and weathered, its frame engulfed in shadow. "Tommy!" she yelled, glancing back, but the writhing mass of darkness multiplied, consuming the space where her son had stood. With a heave, she pushed the door open, a blinding light spilling forth, engulfing her. The shadows let out a piercing wail, an anguished protest swirling around her as she leaped into the unknown. And then, silence. The light dimmed, and she found herself in a different place altogether. Walls lined with photographs, but they weren't just any images, they were faces she recognized from her life, her loved ones staring back at her, eyes hollow and pleading. "Welcome home, Mother," a voice echoed softly, chilling and familiar. Sarah gasped, dread flooding her veins. "What have you done, Tommy?" But all around her, the shadows began to seep back into consciousness, laughing, eager, and hungry. What awaited her now? Was it salvation or damnation? The air felt thick, charged with unease as Sarah stumbled further into the room, her mind racing. The dim light revealed more than just the walls, it unraveled memories long buried in sorrow stirred anew. Photos captured moments of joy, innocence, and love, yet now they bore witness to something grotesque, a gallery of loss. She pressed a hand against her racing heart. "They're just memories," she muttered under her breath, trying to pull herself together. But the eyes of the photographs bored into her, whispering accusations, revealing a truth she wanted to deny. Were they watching her, judging her for being careless, for not protecting Tommy? A shiver ran down her spine as she turned, searching for a way out. The door she had entered through had vanished, replaced by a wall of a darkened void, pulsing rhythmically as if it breathed. "Tommy!" she cried, desperation clawing at her throat, each syllable echoing off the walls. And then, through the hall of shadows, she saw him. Tommy stood at the far end, bathed in a soft glow that contrasted with the thick darkness surrounding him. He appeared unchanged, innocent and sweet, but there was something off. The shadow behind him twisted violently, forming a silhouette that danced along the floor, beckoning with elongated fingers. "Mom! Help me!" His voice cracked, panic slicing through the misty air. He staggered, caught in the grip of the shadow that threatened to swallow him whole. "No!" Sarah shouted, resolve hardening her voice. "Stay where you are." She ran toward him, fear draining her breath. With every stride, the shadows tensed, they did not want her to approach. The mocking laughter grew louder, drowning out Tommy's cries. The photos began to shift, warping and twisting into grotesque versions of her past scenes of terrible failures, of battles she had lost. "Turn back!" they screeched, a cacophony of taunts that echoed in Sarah's mind. "You cannot save him. You lost him the moment you allowed him into this world." "No!" She gritted her teeth and propelled herself forward, fists clenched. "I will not lose him again." The shadow released him momentarily, but it was a cruel tease, a game meant to sow despair. Tommy fell to his knees, clutching his head as darkness enveloped him once more. "Get up, sweetheart!" she screamed, willing him to rise. "I'm coming for you." But the shadows surged, a monstrous wave pushing against her. They clawed at her flesh, dragging her back, whispering sweet lies. "You can't save him. He's ours now." Just given bolstered by fear and determination, Sarah refocused. She reached deep into her heart, remembering the bond they shared, his first steps, laughter over silly jokes, the way he'd curl up against her on stormy nights. With every cherished memory, she drew courage, defiance blooming within her. "I won't surrender," she roared, and with her voice, she conjured a surge of light that erupted from her core, bright enough to push back the encroaching shadows. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The light enveloped them, illuminating the room. Tommy blinked, surprise shifting across his face, and then hope, the most powerful weapon against the darkness. "Mom!" he cried, scrambling back to his feet, drawn toward her. But as their eyes locked, the shadows recoiled, their incantations slipping into howls of anger. "No! You can't! He was ours!" The ground trembled beneath them, an earthquake of rage and desire. Walls shook, and for an instant, Sarah could see a way out, a crack in reality where the shadows were thin and almost transparent. "Tommy! This way!" she yelled, pointing towards the glimmer of hope. As he lurched forward, the shadows snapped, and a fierce tendril shot out, entangling his ankle. Sarah felt a jolt in her chest as she watched him fall, the light flickering around them like a candle about to be extinguished. "Mom!" he screamed, and her heart shattered with that single word. Right then, she made her choice. With a primal scream, she lunged forward, tearing at the shadows, her hands desperately reaching for her son. The inky appendage tightened its grip, but she would never let Tommy go again. Just as her fingertips grazed his foot, the shadows recoiled, howling in fury and fear. And then darkness rushed in, like a tidal wave, consuming them both. When the chaos subsided, the world spun back into focus, but it was different. "Welcome to your reckoning, Sarah," a voice whispered from the depths of the darkness, drenched in malice and glee. She felt a chill wash over her, realization dawning like a bloody sunrise. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. What had she unleashed now? The darkness held its breath, swallowing every ounce of light as Sarah blinked in confusion. She expected pain, or at least the terror of being engulfed entirely. Instead, she found herself standing in an unsettlingly familiar landscape. The room had abandoned its confinement. Cold whispers lingered in the air, vibrant with the echoes of memories just out of reach. Shadows twisted into grotesque forms, flitting at the corner of her vision, yet the details eluded her. She stood in a corridor lined with doors, each marked with crimson stains, the once bright hues now muted, as if time itself had lost its vibrancy. "Tommy?" Her voice wavered, each shout met with silence, save for the distant sound of something scraping against metal. Panic twisted in her gut. She took a tentative step forward, feeling the cold, slick floor beneath her bare feet. A door creaked open on her right. Heart pounding, she veered towards it, adrenaline screaming at her to stay vigilant. The scent of stale air and something sour wafted through the opening. Shadows coiled around the edges like hungry serpents. "Mom?" The voice, faint and muffled, barely cut through the haze. It was him, but it reverberated, almost as if it came from within her own mind rather than from the door. Sarah thrust herself through the threshold. Inside, the air thickened, each breath a struggle. The room pulsed with a dark energy. The walls were plastered with tattered remnants of her life drawings Tommy had made, school photos, and faded birthday balloons. The faces in the pictures seemed to shift, morphing into anguished visages, their eyes pleading, their mouths twisted in silent screams. "Tommy!" She cried out again, desperation igniting her resolve. She darted around the disheveled space, frantically searching for her son. The door slammed shut behind her, a finality in the sound that felt like a coffin closing. She spun, her heart drumming as she rapped on the wood, but a figure materialized in the corner of the room. A tall, thin silhouette, features obscured by an oily darkness. "Did you come to join him?" The voice dripped with malice, slithering around her like smoke. It curled into her ears, suffocating her hope. "You could have stopped this, Sarah. But you wanted your bliss, your ignorance. Tommy!" She screamed, denying the temptation to collapse beneath the weight of despair. Laughter ricocheted off the walls, cruel and mocking. The figure stepped closer, revealing hollow eyes that shimmered with unholy delight. "You think you can save him? You lost him the moment you chose to forget." For a moment, the shadows dimmed, allowing a sliver of light to illuminate a corner where she glimpsed Tommy torn between worlds, an unearthly image of torment. "Help me!" His voice was barely above a whisper, echoing with unshed tears. "No!" She lunged forward, desperate to bridge the gap. A clawed hand shot out, wrapping around her wrist. The pain was immediate, hot and biting. Fear electrified her body, and she twisted free, panic driving her movements. With each step towards Tommy, the walls tightened, shifting like a living entity, reshaping the distance between them, playing a cruel game of chase. The figure laughed again, and something inside of Sarah broke. "I will not let you take him from me." The surge of defiance surged through her. A sudden clarity hit her, a wave of warmth rising from her core. It wasn't just love, it was fury, a wildfire consuming her doubts. "Stay away from us!" she shouted, summoning all her grief and rage. The light within her burst forth, creeping towards the dark figure, illuminating the hollow eyes, and for the first time, it flinched. But just as she thought she had the upper hand, the ground shook violently beneath her. "What have you unleashed, Sarah?" it hissed, the whispered threat swirling into her ears, locking her in place. The walls around her began to warp, cacophonies of Tommy's laughter and sobs tangled in a unity of terror. "Help me!" he cried again, and she felt the pull of his presence drawing her deeper, begging her to breach the shadowy void. Suddenly, the grasp of shadows tightened around her legs, dragging her back. "You will pay for this defiance." And as the cold darkness enveloped her once more, she felt the ground beneath shift and tremble, pulling her into an abyss where echoes became screams. The last thing she saw was Tommy, reaching for her, face twisted in fear and longing, before everything went black. When the darkness receded, Sarah found herself alone once more, trembling, breathless, and just as lost. But the echoes of laughter, mocking and cruel, still lingered in her ears. "Welcome back, Sarah," it whispered, tantalizingly close. "Are you ready for the truth?" The shadows shivered, they pressed against Sarah like a cold wave, thick and suffocating. She could taste the bitterness of despair on her lips, the remnants of a fear so powerful it turned her insides to ice. But amidst the panic, a flicker of anger ignited. She refused to be shackled by their malevolence any longer. "Let him go!" she shouted, her voice fierce against the suffocating dark. Each word sliced through the stillness like glass, reverberating off the walls that felt alive, pulsing and throbbing with the weight of lost souls. If they thrived on her fear, then she would not give them this victory. Tommy's face flashed in her mind, his laughter breaking through the darkness like a sunbeam slicing through fog. "I will not be afraid of you." Her breath caught in her throat as she summoned the memories she cherished, the warmth of his tiny hand in hers, the glow of his smile lighting up her world. As if in response to her defiance, the shadows swarmed closer, a cacophony of despair rising around her, voices intertwining into one terrible chorus. "You can't save him, Sarah." "Accept it," they hissed. "No!" she cried out, pushing against the darkness with all her might. "I will never give in." The light inside her began to swell as she recalled not just how much she loved Tommy, but how strong she was. Each pulse of determination set fire to her veins, illuminating the dreary, oppressive corridor around her. The walls vibrated, shadows pulled back, recoiling from her growing strength. "Tommy!" she shouted again. The name ignited a spark, an electrical current surging through her. "I'm coming. Hold on." A shimmer of light pierced between the shadows, revealing Tommy caught still in that ethereal prison. His face was so pale, so full of fear, but Sarah could see a thread of hope flicker behind his eyes as he fought to escape his tormentors. "Mom!" he cried again, his voice stronger this time, igniting her courage even further. With a surge of adrenaline, she charged into the shadows, the light within her glowing brighter with every step. The figure of darkness sneered, its hollow eyes swirling with rage. "You think you can escape? You think you can defy your fate? That's where you're wrong." Sarah roared, as if her voice alone could shake reality itself. "I refuse to let you control me. We are stronger than your darkness." A warm glow erupted from her core, an energy blazing outward, spreading fiercely against the shadows. Instantly, a wave of light dissolved the thick darkness, sending tendrils retreating into the walls from which they crawled. The air thickened at the seams, and with each heartbeat, the shadows shrank, their power slipping away. "Mom! Please!" Tommy cried out, the urgency in his voice wrapping around her heart like chains. She could see him now, closer than ever, and it fueled her resolve. She pushed forward, unfazed by the specters swirling in anger around her. "Not today!" she yelled, and it felt as though the very fabric of the dark was tearing, stretched too thin. "Tommy, I'm right here." Reaching out with all her strength, she finally grasped his outstretched hand just as the last of the shadows hissed and writhed, desperate to reclaim the light she had stolen. "I'm here, sweetheart. We're going home." With sheer force of will, they surged toward the nearest glimmering light, the faint doorway shimmering ahead. The shadows, once grandeurs that threatened to engulf them, shrank in the face of their combined strength. They had ignited a fire so bright that the darkness couldn't bear to approach. "Go!" Tommy urged, pulling her along with him. The warmth of his tiny fingers intertwined with hers, fueling her inwardly as they surged toward salvation. The doorway loomed ahead, pulsing softly as if it were a heartbeat of everything they loved. They refused to look back. Arms linked, they dashed through. "Mom!" And in a moment that felt suspended in time, they collided with the door and burst through, light flooding their vision. Suddenly, Sarah blinked against the glare, the familiar sound of the diner's bell ringing in her ears as they tumbled out, dazed and breathless. She felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders, the shadows, the fears, the darkness, all left behind. "Tommy!" She looked over, witnessing his smile bloom brightly, a masterpiece of innocence and joy. "Mom, we're safe," he declared, laughter bubbling free as he stood in the warm glow of the diner. Strangers moved about them, people lost to the ordinary rush of life, the hiss of the coffee machine, the soft chatter, the clinking of silverware. Golgotha hadn't changed, it felt like a new beginning. But Sarah knew better than to forget. "We need to remember," she whispered, the weight of the shadows lingering in her heart, always a reminder of courage in the face of fear. It was a tale she had to share, to break the cycle of silence and redemption that lived in shadows. "Let us go home, buddy." She wrapped her arms around him, vowing to always protect him from darkness, both inside and out. And so they stepped forward into the sunlight, a light that would always shine against the looming shadows of their past. Sarah held her son tight, the laughter of a boy echoing through the town of Golgotha, a sound promising that love and brave choices could conquer the darkest of fears. Their story would not end here, but rather continue, woven together in hope and resilience, creating a bond unbreakable by the shadows. But before their lives unfolded anew, remember this: every tale isn't just a journey. It's a reminder of the light that refuses to yield. Now, you have a choice. You need to subscribe now to catch all the exclusive stories that await you. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this incredible conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful tale. Join our journey and let your voice be heard.